something and stopped, wondering what it was about his face that one could not understand. Harold could never claim as his the hour after he had left her, and was one ever close to anyone with whom one did not spend some of the hours of absence? She began to see that hours spent together, when apart, were the most intimate hours of all. And, as Harold did not make one wonder, so he did not make one worry. Never in all her life had there been a lump in her throat when she thought of Harold. There was often a lump in her throat when the man at the next table was coughing. One day, she had been there about 2 months, she said something to him about it. It was hard. It seemed forcing one's way into a room that had never been opened to one. There were several doors he kept closed. "Mr. Clifford," she turned to him impetuously as they were putting away their things that night, "will you mind if I say something to you?" He was covering his paste pot. He looked up at her strangely. The closed door seemed to open a little way. "I can't conceive of minding anything you might say to me, Miss Noah." He had called her Miss Noah ever since she, by mistake, had one day called him Mr. Webster. "You see," she hurried on, very timid now that the door had opened a little, "you have been so good to me. Because you have been so good to me, it seems that I have some right to—" His head was resting upon his hand, and he leaned a little closer, as though listening for something he wanted to hear. "I had a cousin who had a cough like yours," brave now that she could not go back, "and he went down to New Mexico and stayed for a year, and when he came back he was as well as any of us. It seems so foolish not to—" Her voice broke, now that it had so valiantly carried it. "Not to—" He looked at her, and that was all. But she was never wholly the same again after that look. It enveloped her being in a something which left her richer, different. It was a look to light the dark place between two human souls. It seemed for the moment that words would follow it, but, as if feeling their helplessness, perhaps needlessness, they sank back unuttered, and at the last he got up abruptly and walked away. One night, while waiting for the elevator, she heard 2 of the men talking about him. When she went out onto the street, it was with head high, cheeks hot. For nothing is so hard to hear as that which one has half known and evaded. One never denies so hotly as in denying to oneself what one fears is true, and one never resents so bitterly as in resenting that which one cannot say one has the right to resent. That night she lay in her bed with wide open eyes, going over and over the things they had said. "Cure?" one of them had scoffed, after telling how brilliant he had been before he "went to pieces." "Why, all the cures on earth couldn't help him. He can go just so far, and then he can no more stop himself, about as much as an ant could stop a prairie fire." She finally turned over on her pillow and sobbed, and she wondered why. Wondered, yet knew. But it resulted in the flowering of her tenderness for him. Interest mounted to defiance. It ended in blind, passionate desire to "make it up" to him. And again he was so different from Harold. Harold did not impress himself upon one by upsetting all one's preconceived ideas. She felt now that she understood better, understood the closed doors. He was, she could think of no better word than sensitive. And that is why, several mornings later, she very courageously, for it did take courage, threw this little note over on his desk. They had formed a habit of writing notes to each other, sometimes about the words, sometimes about other things. Invitation, noun. That which Miss Noah extends to Mr. Webster for Friday evening, December 2nd, at the house where she lives. Hasn't she already told him where that is? It is the wish of Miss Noah to present Mr. Webster to various other Miss Noahs, all of whom are desirous of making his acquaintance. She was absurdly nervous at luncheon that day, and kept telling herself with severity not to act like a high school girl. He was late in returning that noon, and though there seemed a new something in his voice when he asked if he hadn't better sharpen her pencils, he said nothing about her new definition of invitation. It was almost 5 o'clock when he threw this over on her desk. Appreciation, noun. That sentiment inspired in Mr. Webster by the kind invitation of Miss Noah for Friday evening. Regret, noun. That which Mr. Webster experiences because, for reasons into which he cannot go in detail, it is impossible for him to accept Miss Noah's invitation. Resentment, noun. That which is inspired in Mr. Webster by the insinuation that there are other Miss Noahs in the world. Then below he had written, 3 hours later. Miss Noah, the world is queer. Some day you may find out, though I hope you never will, that it is frequently the things we most want to do that we must leave undone. Miss Noah, won't you go on bringing me as much of yourself as you can to Dearborn Street, and try not to think much about my not being able to know the Miss Noah of Hyde Park? And little Miss Noah, I thank you. There aren't words enough in this old book of ours to tell you how much, or why. That night he hurried away with never a joke about how many words she had written that day. She did not look up as he stood there putting on his coat. It was spring now, and the dictionary staff had begun on W. They had written of joy, of hope and life and love and many other things. Life seemed pressing just behind some of those definitions, pressing the harder perhaps because it could not break through the surface. For it did not break through, it flooded just beneath. How did she know that he cared for her? She could not possibly have told. Perhaps the nearest to actual proof she could bring was that he always saw that her overshoes were put in a warm place, and when one came down to facts, the putting of a girl's rubbers near the radiator did not necessarily mean love. Perhaps then it was because there was no proof of it that she was most sure. For some of the most sure things in the world are things which cannot be proved. It was only that they worked together and were friends, that they laughed together over funny definitions they found, that he was kind to her, and that they seemed remarkably close together. That is as far as facts can take it. And just there it begins. For the force which rushes beneath the facts of life, caring nothing for conditions, not asking what one desires or what one thinks best, caring as little about a past as about a future, save its own future. The force which can laugh at man's institutions and batter over in one sweep what he likes to call his wisdom, was sweeping them on. And because it could get no other recognition, it forced its way into the moments when he asked her for an eraser, when she wanted to know how to spell a word. He could not so much as ask her if she needed more copy paper, without seeming to be lavishing upon her all the love of all the ages. And so the winter had worn on, and there was really nothing whatever to tell about it. She was quiet this morning, and kept her head bent low over her work. For she had estimated the number of pages there were between W and Z. Soon they would be at Z, and then. Shyly she turned and looked at him. He too was bent over his work. When she came in, she had said something about its being spring, and that there must be wild flowers in the woods. Since then he had not looked up. Suddenly it came to her, tenderly, hotly, fearfully, yet bravely, that it was she who must meet Z. She looked at him again covertly, and she felt that she understood. It was the lines in his face that made it clearest. Years, and things blacker, less easily surmounted than years. Oh yes, That too she